different. So I guess I'd want Carrie to ask you to comment on what are some of the key structural things that happen when you're creating an ESOP that are either, I mean, you said to me as we were prepping, right? You want to get it structured right the first time. And what do you
Yeah.
think about when you're thinking about good structure?
When we talked about who should and shouldn't do an ESOP too, it's the structure is so important. I mean, you have to structure it, and it's not one size fits all. Let me give an analogy. Okay, everybody on this call today, right? All the men, you get a pair of jeans, and we're going to send everybody a pair of jeans in their size 32 in the waist. Ladies, everybody's getting a 16. Okay, well, you know what? There's probably a few of us, not me, but a few of you gentlemen that can fit in those 32s, and it's not one size fits all. It doesn't work, right? All these companies are different. The owners are different. There's different goals and objectives and different types of companies. So you don't just rubber stamp and say, this is an ESOP. It isn't a product that you're selling somebody. This is a customized solution, and that's how it should be done. It's not one size fits all. One of the things I don't like that I see in the ESOP community right now is that rubber stamp. The most common thing that you see is 100% sale, and then getting to an S corp as quick as you can with a recycled stock design and SARs and warrants, and it's just like the same thing over and over and over. And quite frankly, I don't think that's necessarily a great design. 100% debt on a company at 5 or 6 times is too much debt and can destroy a company. So it is so critical that as an ESOP, whoever the drafter, the designer is, really needs to sit down with these owners and ask them, who are you? Tell us about your business. What are you trying to accomplish here? And then there's all kinds of flexibility that can be built into the design of an ESOP. It's not one size fits all and a rubber stamp.
And I think based on your comment, right, if someone is actually, a seller is taking back a note for a large part of this, they actually care whether it's structured to survive or not, right? So making sure that the company is healthy on the other side in that structure. And I think there's things set out there. I've been on 2 ESOP corporate boards where the ways in which contributions were made into the plan was very, very different, right? It can be a percentage of the compensation can get allocated every year. It can be all of the profits get allocated every year, right? So there's a huge range of what's set up there at the beginning that really can either enable or constrain the company going forward. So.
Yeah, beware of the drafter too of these ESOPs, because anybody can go set up a ESOP consulting company, and at the end of the day, as Gail knows, it's an ERISA qualified plan, so all it is plan documents. Any CPA or attorney or somebody that wants to go set up one of these shops that is an ESOP designer, just beware, and because they may be able to give documents, but they may not be gifted in being able to design a good plan.
And before we go forward, I think there's one fundamental we didn't cover because a question just came in around this, which is the basic money flow in a transaction. So if you were let's just imagine for simplicity's sake, it's 100% ESOP, right? And the company wanted to sell. So how does the money actually flow when the ESOP is created? So if you could talk about how the leverage works and the repayment of the debt, and how the question is, how is it that the employees pay nothing? So can you do that, Carrie, for us?
Sure, I can. So with an ESOP, and let's just keep it simple. Let's just say it's a 100% sale, and somebody's selling $10 million into an ESOP. Okay, so you'd mentioned, Chris, leverage or unleveraged. So they can either go, if they want money at closing, they can go to a bank, and banks will typically right now lend 2.5 times of EBITDA, and so they'll get some money at closing. On a 10 million right now, we're seeing maybe they'll get 2 or 3 million, maybe even 4 million at closing. So owner agrees to sell into the ESOP. Somebody creates the plan. The owners are selling their stock into the ESOP. They may get $3 million at closing, right? And then they get a seller note or an IOU for the remaining $7 million. When there's an ESOP trust that's established, and all the money is going to flow through that ESOP trust. So at closing, that $3 million will go in and then out of the trust. So there's an inside loan, there's an outside loan, but money goes into the trust and then out of the trust, and that's where it's washed of tax, if you will. But anything that flows through that trust, and the owners are getting paid their money, stock then gets allocated to the eligible participants, and they don't pay a penny for it, but it gets allocated to them, and then they'll see how many, they get an annual benefit statement, and they see how many shares they got allocated, what the current value is, and their total, right, and what their vesting amount is.
So it's like a leveraged buyout in the sense that there's debt taken on, right? And in the future, as the company earns money, they repay that loan with the money that the company earns in the future. And as that, then the trust, instead of having debt, now has ownership in the shares and allocates them out to the employees. But if that's just a simpler way to think about it, right? The seller, the plan is in the middle, and it takes on debt to buy it from the owners, and then the company uses the cash to repay those loans. And as the company earns enough to repay the loans, right, that ownership can be allocated to the employees.
That's right.
Clear.
And you're talking about the leveraged. I mean, there's some owners that say, well, do I have to do a leveraged ESOP? Why do I have to have a bank involved? And the answer is no. They could sell or finance the whole transaction. They could take the whole note on themselves. And why would they do that? Well, instead of paying a bank interest, they could pay themselves the interest for carrying the note on the transaction. The only caveat to that is if they're doing 1042, they will need some money to be able to get through 1042.
So I want to just move, because there's a lot of, some of the complexity of this is as you get into the governance of that new structure. So I just want to take a minute to comment on who are the new people in your world, right? You go into a typical corporate board, right? And you've got the board, and you've got the company, and maybe you've got the SEC, and you've got the shareholders out there, and you've got employees. But in the ESOP world, first of all, the employees aren't just employees, right? They're owners, but they're really participants in a plan that is the 100% owner of the company, right? So they've got different roles now. The ESOP itself, the ESOP trust, is responsible to the participants 100%, right? Their interest as a shareholder in the company is for the benefit of the participants. That trust has trustees, right? So now you have another group beyond the board who are the trustees of the trust that you need to deal with. And those usually have the fiduciary obligation, right, associated with ERISA. You may have other owners. We talked about partial ESOPs. So there may be other owners than other shareholders other than the ESOP. The executives themselves are now employees and executives. And often on ESOPs, there's a fair number of internal board members. So they may also be board members. They may also be appointed trustees, right? So you have management can have a lot of different hats to wear. And the board of directors, an interesting circularity is usually the board of directors is appointing the trustees, and the trustees are electing the board of directors. So in the world of clarity or independence as a concept on, say, a public board, when you get onto an ESOP board, there's a lot of potentially conflicting interests that I think everyone just needs to be mindful of as they go into this.